We read in chapter 1 that Ahaziah, the son of Ahab, succeeded Ahab as king, but died childless. Therefore, his brother Jehoram succeeded Ahaziah to the throne of Israel, the northern kingdom. When Elisha refers to Jehoram's parents in 3:13, he means Ahab and Jezebel. King Elisha of Moab seizes his opportunity to rebel against Israel when Ahab dies. And as Ahaziah did not respond, or did not have the chance, his brother Jehoram takes action, with Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom. As before the campaign he fought in support of Ahab, Jehoshaphat insists that the Lord be consulted. Elisha is known, but his reputation at this point is based on his relationship to the more famous Elijah. Even though Elisha is a northerner, he rejects the idolatrous Omri dynasty and only complies out of respect for the southern king. The prophets of this time acted in ways that people probably did not understand, but we are even further removed from their world. We are probably used to the Christian prophets who largely spoke oracles to churches, although they might act out their predictions or use symbols. Elisha asks for music, perhaps to help him enter a trance. We saw music accompanying the prophets earlier in 1 Samuel 10:5. Those who were particularly powerful, the wonder workers such as Moses, Elijah, and Elisha, also used objects like staffs or cloaks, or used certain things like salt, flour, or sticks, which, when applied, had curative effects. There was a recognizable method to their miracles for the ancient mind, even though it could not simply be replicated by anybody. Even Jesus would sometimes use methods in his miracles, such as applying a mud paste to a blind man's eyes. However, Jesus could heal with only a word, which he often did. The power of Jesus was of an altogether other order than even these incredible men. Elisha predicts success for the campaign. The sign will be that the water will appear without rainfall, which is badly needed by the armies. But this provision serves a dual purpose, and it tricks the Moabites into lowering their guard. This episode has some very strange elements. Firstly, Elisha says in verse 19 that amongst other activities designed to decimate Moab, they will also cut down the trees. Is this a prediction or a command? The problem with this is that Deuteronomy 20:19 forbids it. The second strange element is in verse 27, when Elisha, seeing that nothing has worked for him and something extraordinary must be done, sacrifices his own son. The text says, "A great wrath came upon Israel, so they withdrew." We must ask, to whom did Elisha sacrifice? Yahweh or Chemosh, the god of Moab? What was this wrath that forced Israel to withdraw, especially when it seems as though Elisha had predicted total success? The simple fact facing us is that we have none of the answers. However, we can think some thoughts. First of all, my guess is that he sacrificed to Chemosh, even though he was not a god who normally required such things. Elisha must have assumed Chemosh had abandoned them for some fault, and he was being appeased for salvation. Secondly, his sacrifice appeared to work. But the Lord would not respond to such a sacrifice, because child sacrifice was an abomination to him. Nor could Chemosh respond, as he did not exist. This wrath could not, therefore, be divine. My guess is that such a desperate and appalling act rallied the remaining Moabites, and their response was so fierce that the Israelites could not withstand them. If this is so, the writer of this verse worded it in a very curious way. As for Elisha's predictions, they did actually all come true. Moab was destroyed and re-subjugated. It was only this one city, Kir Hareseth, that was left with its walls intact. Chapter 4 contains a series of outstanding miracles, one of which is very similar to one of Elijah's. and another which foreshadows a major miracle of Jesus's. In 1 Kings 17, Elijah is sent to a widow in Zarephath. He multiplies the tiny remaining amount of meal and oil for her so that she can feed him and herself and her son. The son later dies and is placed on Elijah's bed in the upper chamber where he stayed. Elijah stretches out over him 3 times and the child is resuscitated. In 2 Kings 4, the woman is not a widow, but she is childless. She specially constructs the upper chamber for Elisha. Elisha does multiply oil, but it is for a different woman who was a widow. Elisha predicts the barren woman will be given a son, although he later dies. Elisha's staff is first used by a servant, but it does not work. The problem is not that the wrong person is wielding it. Something greater is required. Elisha performs the same method that Elijah used, only he does it twice and not thrice. The idea of the method is the transference of life from one body part to the corresponding body part. The important thing to note in both cases is that the prophets pray. Even if it was recognizable as a magic method to the ancient mind, these men depended on God for the results, who cannot be controlled, manipulated, or enticed. Another example of something like prophetic magic follows in verses 42 to 44, where Elisha uses flour to remove the death from the pot. Meal and flour were considered to have magical effects and were used in rituals, being sprinkled around or used to make objects. Elisha does something different here, which is rather unmagical, but the ancients would have understood the use of flour as something which could remove evil. But it is as, O man of God, that they entreat him. They understand the power is not his own. But there is nothing magical about the final miracle of the chapter. When the man protests that he cannot feed 100 people with only 20 loaves, Elisha responds in verse 43 with an oracle from the Lord. The Lord said, "They shall eat and have some left." Jesus will feed well over 5,000 people with even less food, but it is his own word which provides the power.